Hello again, and welcome, art peeps, to the green table for another art supply review. This time we're going to look at ink delivery systems, and specifically the two most common ink delivery systems that are in use today. The felt tip pen, like this, and a ballpoint pen, like so. Now, there are all art alternatives to an ink delivery system. Some traditional methods, like a quill, which is a wet ink delivery system. Very traditional. It's a great tool to use as well. You can get some great qualities with that. It's just like a brush, a wet delivery system. We'll touch on that another time because it is different properties that apply and different things to go into on that. For this episode, though, we're going to focus on these two because they are quite common. Artists, illustrators around the world are using these, the felt tip and the ballpoint. They do come in a variety of shapes and sizes. Essentially, they're all the same as far as how they work, and we'll discuss that. So here we go, the battle of the felt tip versus the ballpoint. Both pens are essentially 20th century developments. They've evolved throughout the 20th century, and they're in common use today. As you may know, we do have an overriding presence, which demands we touch on history, so that's what we'll do right now. Lucky. We'll start with felt tip pens, a quick history. They've been around for quite some time. The tip is generally made of a porous pressed fiber, such as felt. You do have the container, which is plastic or aluminum, or it can be felt as well, which holds the ink and distributes it down to that tip to be able to get to the surface. Traditionally, the chemicals that were used with the ink were toluene and xylene, right up until 1990s. And these are very toxic chemicals, and it's actually surprising that it took until the 90s for them to start use alternatives like propanol, butanol, creosols generally. They're still toxic, but I mean they have worked it on a bit from the past. Hence the strong smell that you always associate with felt tip pens. Originally, it was Lee Newman in 1910 who received the patent for a felt tip pen. There was some of those issues involved with it. The container, putting the ink into the tip, and the tip would tend to dry out over time. That's why they were playing with those different type of chemicals to lessen that lessen the drying time and keep it moist. Because once it dries, it's a defunct pen. You can't really use it. Those early stages were sort of that experimentation. It was 1926 when Benjamin Pascach got the patent for a fountain paintbrush. It was sponge-tipped. Same type idea. Soaks up the ink, transfers it onto the paper. We will jump ahead a bit. It's 1953. Magic markers, Sidney Rosenthal got the patent for it. And we all know magic markers. I mean, kids have been getting high on these things for a long time. And it's one of those things that has pretty much established. It's still out there. I mean, magic markers are very common. I just want to touch on an artist who actually does incorporate felt, incidentally, just to sort of go down a different path here just for a second, because we always like to talk about contemporary artists or even recent artists from the past. Joseph Boyus, great artist. He was a World War II fighter pilot before becoming an international artist, and he got shot down over the Crimea. It was a group of nomadic Tartar tribesmen that saved him. They wrapped his body in animal fat and felt and nursed him back to health in that way. It was one of their traditional methods of sort of healing wounds and whatnot, the animal fat and the felt. When he was working on his own artistic practice, he incorporated these two materials in a lot of his work to create a personal lexicon about his own journey and his own visual language that's associated with these deep things that he went through. Joseph Boyus, fantastic artist, part of the Fluxus Neo-Dada movement, which includes greats like Namjoon Paik. Even Yoko Ono is part of that. Check him out if you're not familiar with him. Amazing artist, Joseph Boyus, and well worth the research to get into that. Let's jump to ballpoint pens now. Ballpoint pens have been around for a long time. (1888), October 30th, it was John J. Loud who received the first patent. He was a leather tanner, and he needed a delivery system to get ink onto the leather to be able to write on it. He developed the ballpoint pen. It's not the ballpoint pen we know of today, per se. It does have the fundamental ball in the tip, but it wasn't creating an even line. It was suitable for his leather purposes, but it wasn't what we know of today as far as the ballpoint writing pen. It took until Laszlo Biro received the patent in June 15th of 1938 that we start to see the ballpoint pen as it is today. Now, Biro, as many of those artists at the time, or even inventors, anyone who was surrounded by the ravages of war in Germany, he jumped ship. He went to Argentina. Now, when he was in Argentina, he filed a patent for Biro pens of Argentina in 1943, and these are the pens we know, and that patent is used by many companies. The big ones, Papermate, Bic as well, which used the catchphrase, "Writes the first time every time" in the 1960s, which assisted in making them the world's producer of ballpoint pens. Just a brief history for you, give you a breakdown of it. Both have been around throughout the 20th century, and they do have different qualities, and we'll explore a little bit of that now. With that brief history lesson out of the way, it became important for me to show you the tips. I wasn't sure how to do this. I contemplated a few different ways. I took pictures, but it doesn't give you the sense of how those tips are working. I was going to scour Google for images like we did for the history lesson. I thought that that would be not very useful in this case. So I came up with a model. It's a very simple model, keep that in mind. I think it'll get the idea across though. I'm just using a cardboard tube here. Think of this as the receptacle. So in here is where your ink is going to be, and it applies to both pens. In the case of felt tip, you're going to have this container which has an embedded fabric or synthetic that has the ink inside of it, holding it. Holding the ink inside of here, leading down to that delivery system at the tip. That's where the main difference is between the two pens. It allows you to get that ink onto the surface. In the case of a felt tip pen, it will be something similar to this. I'll use this brush as an example. It is a synthetic brush. It has the same properties as what is being used in felt tip pens. They're not technically felt, most of them. You will be able to find felt, but they will be like this, a synthetic. With the felt tip pen, you have inside of this receptacle is your ink, your embedded ink material. Your delivery system, the tip, is going to be very similar to this. Your ink is coming down this tube, going into the tip, soaking it, and allowing you to get that ink onto the paper. It's a constant soak, and that has always been the concern with felt tip pens, is to keep that ink wet enough to be able to deliver onto the paper. Hence why they've used those assortment of chemicals, varying degrees of health, of course. They currently have the AP on them. We know better about AP, and that's standard. With these pens, as gravity is forcing it down, it will keep that tip moist. Let's move on to ballpoint pens, and I have this little happy guy to use as the example. Same premise, you have your receptacle, your ink is inside. A bit different than the embedded fabric. In the ballpoint, it's going to be a receptacle of the liquid ink. You have your ball on the tip, and that allows you to extract the ink at an even flow. The ball is turning with the movement of your pen. The ink is being plugged by that pen, and as you move it across the surface, the ball spins within that tip, releasing, in theory, an even amount of ink. You can have hiccups sometimes where you have little splotches and whatnot, but they're fairly consistent. This is plugging. That ink flow, every spin releases an amount of ink onto your paper. Let's look at specific examples here of the Sharpies, or rather the felt tip pens. I have quite a few, and we'll go through those, explain the sort of different varieties you can get and the properties of them. Now, these are felt tip pens, a little pricier. I also have Sharpies here, which are the most common. You'll find these everywhere, and they're probably the most used felt tip / marker type pens. These little ones here, They look similar to, I guess, a ballpoint pen, but they do have the felt tip. These are all synthetics, every one of these. Felt is not necessarily the most common thing anymore. It's a compressed animal hair fiber. You can still find some of those pens. Generally, they will be a synthetic used. These are mini Sharpies. They have the smaller tip, which can be problematic in itself. There's one ballpoint there and another ballpoint. Ballpoints are ballpoints. The Sharpies have a wide variety, but the ballpoints are essentially the same. Like I showed you with the model, you're going to have that ball embedded in the tip. These felt tips have different wedges and whatnot points that are being used, and that's what we're going to look at with these different examples. This red Sharpie here, just to explain, you saw the model, how this works. Inside of this pen, you have the tip here, which is soaking up the ink, but inside of the handle itself is your embedded fabric or material, a spongy type substance which contains the ink. It's an alcohol-based ink, and it will come down to the tip, soak it up, and give you that line. Fairly consistent, comes in a wide assortment of colors. The same applies here. This one has a sharp tip and it smells. Definitely gets you high. There's no doubt about it, which is probably not a good thing. And this one here is a wedge. More of a wedge type Sharpie. Same type chemicals. I mean, we have the propanol, the alcohols involved. This is the small tip Sharpie. I do have problems with some of these small tips. They tend to break. It's all due to pressure, of course, the pressure you're applying, but also the fact that they can dry out a bit quicker than some of those thicker ones that we just went through. I've broke many a felt tip pen, and not necessarily from pushing hard as much as just the wear and tear on it. These are a little pricier. These are illustration-based felt tip pens. I won't say the brand name because I probably won't say too many nice things about it, even though I do like them. But look at this. This is kind of a brush type pen, and you can get those different line qualities depending on the pressure that you're applying. They do have that benefit. They state they're archival, which is a good thing. And remember, felt tip pens, they're going to vary in price. They're going to be all over the board. Sharpie's cheap. As you go up to the illustration pens, you're going to be paying a lot more. The AP is on all of these. We've talked about that already, so I don't need to go into details. These are the same type premise, illustration type pens, and these have, sort of some of the finer ones, the brush ones like this. So you have that synthetic point on it, which acts like a brush. Depends on the pressure that you apply. And there's my camera crash, but we're back. You saw the examples of Sharpie. Let's go into ballpoint. I already did these, but like I said, my camera just had a crash out, so we'll pick it up. We did the Sharpies. Let's just look at these ballpoints. We don't need to go too far into them. They're pretty much a standard type idea with a ballpoint. A bit different than the Sharpies, which have those variants as far as the imitation brush, the wedges, just the straight points. A wide variety coming through those actual, that material, the felt tip premise. This one here, just to give you an idea of pricing, that's $30. Okay, the Sharpies are $1. They vary anywhere within there. Now, ballpoints are the same. You can get a wide variety of them, but they do have different properties, and let's look at that right now. This is a Vision. It's a Uniball Vision. Goes by I in Asian markets, Vision in North America. But look at this line that you can get from that. Very consistent. It's going to be the same every time, and that's because of that ball wedged in the tip, which is regulating that ink flow that's coming out. That's what I like about these ballpoint pens. You can always get the same line every time. You can rely on it. And if you do need to add more line to make it darker, easy enough to do. This one here has a little gauge on the side so you can see where the ink level is. A bit different than those Sharpies with the embedded fabric. This one just has sort of the liquid ink inside of that receptacle. But the flow is good. You can crosshatch, you can do all sorts of things with it. You're not going to have any spillage or bleeding. In most cases, these are gold. I really like the ballpoint pens. They've consistently worked for me. On the way I draw, they're perfect. I like a lot of line. you need to consider these things. They both have different properties. You can see it right here on the paper. I mean, the felt tips have that certain look to them. The ballpoints, on the other hand, have that consistency of a hard edge line. We should do a couple of examples here to show you, because I want to talk about some of these tips, and these can dry out on the felt tips. You won't have that same problem with a ballpoint, but the felt tips, certain sections of that can dry out based on the alcohols used or the type of ink, the dyes that are used. That can cause problems. This one is an archival ink. It's supposed to be good. I have had some issues with light fastness. The sun can bleach out that dye pretty quick. It varies. I've had ones that hold tight and hold fast, and ones that don't. Hence another reason why I don't really like the felt tips, and it's because of the tip that they have to worry about. That drying out, they have to use different chemical properties to keep that wet. As well, these tips can cause issues, as I just showed you up there. Sharpies, they're cheap, and I have done work in Sharpies. I've done whole paintings in Sharpies like this one. This is kind of a bar scene. I used ink, but look at that Sharpie that bled out. You see that purple-blue hue? That is the base ink, the dye that's used in the Sharpie. I put a clear coat over top and I bled that out. Obviously resultant of the alcohols mixing with the clear coat, the material over the clear coat, but still, it's supposed to be a permanent marker. How disappointed was I when I put that on, it bled out, and I had to paint certain pieces out because of that clash. Don't believe the hype. Permanent to a point, but based on what you're also, if you're using mixed media, it's also relative to what other materials you're using. That's a lack of consistency with Sharpies and felt tips in general that I find. It's the ink. The ink is going to be an issue. Permanent, yes, but only to a point. And I mean, you can get different chemicals that are making up different felt tip pens, but they're going to be, because you have that receptacle, that's a major concern inside, and that's always going to dictate your chemical properties, because they're always concerned about those tips drying out, and they can still dry out, I assure you, and we'll touch on that. The ballpoint pens, on the other hand, even these, it has a permanent India type ink inside. It's just sitting in there as a liquid, and I just do not have those problems. Uniball is one of my faves, and no, they're not paying me, as I state there. It's just a product that's really worked for me. And I mean, if I need to supplement, I use that hard edge line. I may use a brush to bring something in, a real brush, not the fake brush like in that felt tip. But I can supplement. I can use some of the ink, the ballpoint, supplement with that brush. These are consistently good. The light fast is good, and that's based on the ink. It's a different type of ink that they're using in these pens as opposed to the felt tip. The felt tip has different considerations than the ballpoint does. The ballpoint can use those liquid inks. I mean, even look at my hand here. This is just from Sharpies. They can be messy as well. That's something to keep in mind. Ballpoints tend to not have that messiness to them because it is just such a hard edge line that just delivers right onto the paper from that hard edge tip. We should do some examples. I think we'll do two here. I'll just draw a cat and I'll speed it up. You will see, though, the properties of the two, so let's do this. A couple of very quick sketches here. You just saw these play out. Two cats, one in ballpoint, one in felt tip. That's the ballpoint, that's a felt tip, as if you didn't know, be it that I wrote it on the top. Let's talk about these lines. Look at this line with the ballpoint. Stiff, hard edge, consistent, the same throughout. Never changes. If I want something darker, I just go over it again with more line, punch it out. That's the nice thing, the consistency of that, and how it's always going to be the same. You can rely on that. And that, I mean, no, that's my dead one. Grab a live one. Look at that. You can start to add lots of line to be able to create some of your contrasts, and relying on that consistency as part of it. Very nice line, hard edge, like I said. Different than something And I mean, it's based on the way that tip is, that hard tip with that nice ink coming out. You see this line, that's the Sharpie. The outside I did with this pen brush. And there are some issues that happen. Some of this line didn't fully come through, and that's because the tip of this has little dry pieces in it over time. It's all about that mixture that they're using. The ink that's coming down due to gravity into the tip causes some problems. Some of it has dried out, creating that lack of consistency in line. And I have a problem with that. If a pen claims to do something, it better stick with it. It has to be a product that I can rely upon, and if I don't know any better, I'm going to go by what it's telling me. The ballpoint pens are always consistent, but this, looking at that line and what can actually happen, because I never want to go over this again. I don't want to have to duplicate my line. That completely loses the painterly aspect, the sort of wet ink look that brush type pen lends itself. The ballpoint, on the other hand, consistent. You can rely on that consistency. Here, you cannot. On the felt tip to pull off a certain thing and it doesn't, that's a real piss off, I tell you. With this brush, I mean, you can get those, but you see right there, boom, I had to go over that again. And that's because it didn't fully come out. I was applying the same pressure. There's no reason that should have happened except for the inadequacies of that tip itself. You can see the difference in the look though. This has a nice flowing line. Okay, so there is that. It fully depends on what you're going for. What do you want out of your work? Any pen you buy is going to indicate if it's a ballpoint or a felt tip. It'll be on the packaging. It promotes that, basically. It's going to say if it's permanent as well, which is something to consider. Are you going to be adding water to this after the fact? Consider these important things that I've pointed out. There's varieties to the felt tip. There are those chemical compositions you need to consider, and the tip itself, its inadequacies. Ballpoint, on the other hand, like I said, has that consistency that I rely upon. Even with my own work, here's an example. I do a lot of line, so just going over and over, obsessively going over with the line, punching out the details is what I like to do, and it's obsessive. But the ballpoint pen is very well suited for that, and that's why I prefer it, basically, is I can rely on that consistency and have that fine line that I can build. Felt tip, I can't rely on that way. I do use it from time to time, but for those reasons, like I said, it can bleed, the chemical composition, those sorts of things cause issues. The ballpoint, I don't have that issue. The felt tips, I mean, both of these you can get in a variety of prices. The felt tips are going to run anywhere from even a couple of bucks all the way up to dozens of dollars, depending on the type of pen. The chemical composition is going to be the same, though. It's tried and true. It's what they're sticking with. And it will give you this divergent line based on the type of tips you have. Ballpoint is going to be very consistent. It's not going to change much. You can get, 0.5s, 0.7s, 0.3s, but it's going to be that hard edge line. Consider these things as you're choosing which product to use for your work. Will you add water? Will it be mixed media? Are you concerned about light fastness? Do you want consistency? Maybe you want some of those things that may pop up. But other than that, thank you again for viewing. Always appreciate it, and take care.